Start again, Rob, sorry.
Okay. Uh, Thank you all for joining this special meeting of the Pension Board, calling into session. Uh, One agenda item, which is to review the pension fund's exposure to Russian securities. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris DeFusco.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for getting together on relatively short notice. You should have received two documents, one a short slide deck from Marquette addressing some broader points regarding what's going on with the Russian markets, and a second document with a proposed divestment action regarding Russian exposure. I'll spend a couple minutes talking about the current exposure, and Marquette will certainly have comments, and we'll be happy to take questions. If you look at the second page of the slide deck, this is a brief overview of some of the major actions that have been taken. And as more are taken every day, this is far from a complete list. There's been continued sanctions against the Russian economy, individual Russians, and even businesses that are not based in Russia or headquartered there, are continuing to cut off contact with that country. Our exposure, as we've talked about a little bit in some of the messages that have gone out, is very minimal as an overall percent of the portfolio. It makes up roughly 11 basis points of the entire pension fund AUM. And in terms of individual managers, which you see on page 4, because things are happening so quickly, some of this, and it's through no fault of Marquette's, it's just happened within the last 24 hours or so. Some of the exposure has decreased even further. So, for example, Brandywine Global has been able to fully exit their position in the Russian ruble, and MetLife was able to do the same thing. So while those positions, as they're being closed out, formally, remain on the books for a few days, they are out of both of those positions. The remaining positions there, the summary is accurate. Rumline holding, the bulk of the securities, not surprisingly, as an index manager. Capital Group holding 3. Strategic Global Advisors, kind of a unique situation there. They actually had no Russian exposure until, I believe it was February 14th. I'm just looking at my notes. And then one of their British-based companies actually had a spin-off to a publicly traded Russian company. And that won't take effect until April 7th. That's when the shares will be delivered to them. And then the remaining minimal amount of securities, bonds, are held by MetLife and Brandywine Global. So the $9 million in exposure that's listed on the page, it's actually less. It's actually less than that now. Marquette goes on to summarize, the country-based exposure, and I think helpfully, just to illustrate the minimal nature of our exposure. You can see, and it's actually, gotten, worse for Russia since then. But as you can see, based on the data of these slides, the Russian economy would not even be in the top 10 of global GDP, and they actually fall, beneath several, or a few, I should say, U.S. states, and I suspect it's more since this slide was written. Plan sponsors such as ourselves have continued to monitor their exposure. Managers have begun getting out of positions that they can. The sanctions have frozen some positions, at least temporarily. So there are, for example, I believe 2 of the 3 bonds in the MetLife portfolio are not tradable at the moment. As of last night, the 3rd was. And for Rumline, I think as of late yesterday, all but 3 of the stocks were tradable. It appears the plan, not just for Rumline, but for many index managers, will be around March 9th, assuming the markets are open, that they need to access. MSCI will actually be removing Russia from the relevant indexes, which would mean the Rumlines, the Vanguards, the Fidelities, et cetera, of the world would need to sell all those stocks to meet the index and stay in compliance. Again, but that's subject to market availability. A couple of the stocks they own and others own are sanctioned and not tradable at the moment. From a financial, impact, divestment, not, staff and Marquette are comfortable with it, would be supportive of it. We don't believe there is a significant financial hit or burden on the plan. In fact, given what's happening, it's probably prudent to get out of the positions that we can in a responsible, timely and prudent fashion. And with that, happy to have Marquette make some comments, as well as take any trustee questions about the portfolio.
And Chris, you touch on this a little bit? Can you talk about what the process would be for trying to unwind?
Sure. So we would, assuming the board, adopts the proposed resolution or something similar, we would instruct the managers to exit the positions, in a timely and prudent fashion. Given that we understand some of the market availability is out of their control, and it's subject to international and federal regulation. So we would ask the managers at, obviously in as short of time as possible, but recognizing some markets may not be available for a while, we would ask them to exit those few remaining positions that we have. I should also add, Rob, and I think it's touched on in the slides, our review, as well as Marquette's, has not uncovered, even in the really old positions, we have not uncovered to date any Russian exposure in the private assets. So we have not seen anything in private equity or the private debt. If that changes, we will let you know, but nothing we have seen to date shows a position in a private equity, vehicle. Yeah. So that would be the
resolution
procedure.
Cover that if we did discover it later, right?
It would cover it. We would have to, yes, we would have to talk about how that would work. I mean, obviously with private equity, it would be a much longer process if that were to occur. To date, it doesn't appear that will. But yeah, we could come back and talk to the board about how that process, could be a little bit more time intensive.
Chris, just a quick question on that. To exit positions in a timely and prudent fashion, can you just flesh out for me a little bit what the roadblocks would be?
Sure. So, for example, as of my last conversation with Rumline, I'll just use as an example. 3 of the stocks that are in the index, I don't have the 3 specific names in front of me, though. I'm happy to get them out to the board.
That's okay.
They've been sanctioned / frozen, so they cannot be traded on any exchange, domestic or foreign, at the moment. So that's a roadblock. We can ask the managers to divest, But if they're unable to trade, obviously there's nothing we can do. The second roadblock,
I'm sorry, Chris, the frozen by like the Russian markets or
that's
frozen?
part of it.
Okay,
In some cases, and also some of the stocks, because of US and international sanctions, cannot be traded. You may have seen, for example, just yesterday, the London Stock Exchange put 50 stocks on a no trade list. Like they cannot be traded at the moment. So if
okay,
we were to hold one of those, they couldn't be traded.
okay,
The second roadblock that we have seen, and a couple managers have brought it up, is that a lot of brokers are reluctant to touch some of these trades because they're worried about running afoul of sanctions or getting into some sort of trouble. So a lot of the brokers, even with stocks or bonds that are technically liquid, are really approaching a lot of these transactions on a case-by-case basis. If you run into a situation with a manager who works with a number of brokers and all of the brokers are saying, we're not going to touch this transaction for XYZ, then it takes the manager additional time to try to get out of the position.
got it.
Those are the two biggest roadblocks, as well as any new regulations or unforeseen, things that could come down the pike. Those are the two biggest roadblocks I see at the moment.
Thank you.
Sure. Dave or Quaco, I don't know if you wanted to touch on anything in the slides or add anything.
So
No,
Chris,
I
I asked a question. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So I asked a question. And I think Rebecca just touched on it, but
Carol, you broke up a little?
You broke up a little, Carol.
how much of Rumline's assets are in Russia?
It's very minimal. I believe it's in the slides. It is.
Somewhere I read that. I thought you said Rumline had the most.
They do, but it's extremely minimal because it's the index. So out of the entire index, and this would apply to any manager, whether it was, again, Fidelity, Rumline, any index manager, they had 16 total securities. It makes up, I guess I have several documents open at once. Quaker, do you happen to have the exact percentage of?
This is one of those things that's we're gonna have to live with it. It's just for now it is what it is, and I don't know if they're and look.
Chris, let me Dave, jump in if you have the number.
So Russian equity as a percentage of global non-US all cap is roughly 75 basis points, and that is of the broadest non-US equity index, inclusive of developed and emerging markets.
And what does that translate to in terms of dollars?
Is that not in this slide deck?
There's a total number, but not for, nothing specifically for.
Yeah, we don't have it for Rumline, but I would say just ballpark, it's approximately, I'd say 2.5 million,
Okay.
3 million. That seems to be like the ballpark number. And that number will continue to decline in light of actions being taken. Chris alluded to this, but as part of the sanctions, we're also seeing some of the index providers also eliminate Russia from the benchmark. So ultimately, the proactive movements from all sides of the globe continue to minimize Russia's role and Russia's exposure, even in the indexes. So the index funds, the EM index, as an example, no longer contains Russia. MSCI has eliminated Russia from the EM index. So ultimately, as trading unfreezes, as brokers and managers they're in a position to essentially handle the stocks that are Russian owned, we will see those exposures go down to zero, if not very close to zero, in terms of exposures within the index.
Got it. Thank you.
And just for historical context, so the Moscow Exchange is closed, and this is the longest closure of the Moscow Exchange since the collapse of the Russian ruble in 1998. So we have experienced this before.
So the man,
Sorry, Carol, did you have a question? Dave, why don't you finish your thought? And
Just the point is, we have seen a closure of the Russian exchange before, and that was for different reasons. That was due to a collapse in the Russian ruble, but certainly not related to geopolitical conflict. The point is that we have seen closures of certain exchanges where securities are untradeable for really two reasons. There's no functioning exchange, or there is no counterparty that's willing to take on the risk of accepting distressed security or sanctioned security.
any other questions for Marquette or for Chris?
Rob, I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a standard that we are setting for re-examining this topic, the lifting of sanctions, or set in time in the future?
We can look at so we have a draft resolution. We can look through that and see whether it has that. Should we move on to looking at the resolution? We can think that's where Bob's questions again, unless anyone has any other questions about the presentation.
Nope.
Okay. So there's a draft resolution. Jim, can you read the therefore clauses, what the resolution calls for?
Just trying to unmute there. There we go.
Got it.
So therefore, it is resolved that the board take the following targeted divestment or other appropriate action with respect to the fund's investments with Russian-related entities or individuals. That term, Russian-related entities or individuals, is previously defined to include, companies and individuals and so forth. Section number 1, the board authorizes investment staff in consultation with the law department and the board's general and private equity consultant to take all appropriate action to sell, redeem, withdraw, or divest any investment in any asset held by a Russian-related entity or individual as expeditiously, effectively, and prudently possible. Section number 2. This resolution neither requires nor shall be construed to require any sale, redemption, withdrawal, or divestment of any such investment at such time or in such manner that is inconsistent with applicable laws, regulations, rules, orders, or other legal directives, or with the duties of the board and its members as a fiduciary and under the code. Section 3. The chief investment officer shall report to the board any actions taken by investment staff pursuant to this resolution promptly and no later than within 30 days of the date of adoption of this resolution.
Thank you. So I think the answer to your question, Bob, is not really, but it's something we could revisit at the appropriate time if we needed to.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion about the resolution?
Do we have an idea as to, I saw that the PSERS did something similar, I think earlier in the week regarding Russian investments. I don't know if they did a resolution, but if they did, would there be a way to sort of see what their resolution looked like? And if they provided any more, I think to Bob's point, any more specific criteria? I think there's a benefit to sort of leaving it, open, but I also wonder if there's also a benefit to sort of laying out there when we would, sort of what would we consider to basically bring back those investments into Russian entities.
Well, they would have to, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, they would have to get out of Ukraine, right? But could we vote on this today and then the pension board work on some sort of language, Diana, and Bob, that could sort of frame the discussion going forward?
Yeah, I guess that's what the general, right? I think that's sort of what we're trying to see if it's better for us and in better for us, is it better like PR wise or better legal wise to sort of put out there what the criteria would be? Or is it better for us just to sort of leave it somewhat vague and giving us more wiggle room? I agree with you. I think one of the key criteria would be to get completely out of Ukraine, but I don't know. Who knows where we're going to be if and when that happens, if there's additional criteria that we would need to see. So I don't know. It's just more so, I think, a general question of what is better for us as a board as to what better, I think, memorializes our action and our sentiment and our position on this. I think the resolution right now is strong, but I guess more specifically, the question is, do we want to, does it make us appear stronger if we put more criteria out there? Or we just leave it as it is and then we can amend and address like in 30 days or so?
Yeah, because I think the whereases make it really clear why we're doing it. And I didn't want to torture Jim by making him read all that. So I think there's a clear link to what we're doing. We could either, we could amend now and put in some language about, when we'd come out, or we could just take that action at a later date. I think either way works.
I did try to, in response to Diana and the controller's point and Bob's question, to leave some flexibility and also, but include the fact that there would have to be a report within 30 days about what was taking, because as you all know and have heard and as explained this morning, the situation is in such flux, it would be very difficult to even define what the criteria would be in a future date, even possibly later this afternoon, things may change. So that's why it seemed like the focus should be on what we can do today, specifically with what we hold. And that's the authorization given, and then respond appropriately in the future.
Makes sense.
Diana, in answer to your question, the resolution, and I can send it around, that the state board passed is significantly shorter with less detail. It just instructs, and I can send it around, but it authorizes their interim chief investment officer to take all necessary action to divest PSERS from investments in Russia as expeditiously as possible, consistent with fiduciary duty of prudence. No future investments shall be brought before the board until such time as the board directs otherwise. So they did not, at least according to what's on their website, and it doesn't mean we can or shouldn't, but in answer to your question, they did not provide specifics on what would get them to revisit that policy.
I like Jim's better anyway.
Yeah, I would.
I like Jim's too.
I do too.
Thank you.
Always like Jim's work better. And I would just say this, that our best practices have been very, very good when compared to other public pension funds, particularly the one you mentioned, Diana.
Oh, I know they're in deep doo-doo, to put it mildly. But I know that I saw that they were featured, I think, earlier this week on this topic. So
yeah, I saw that.
See what they were doing, and as usual, we are above and beyond them. So I'm happy to see that.
Does that address your question, Diana? You good?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Someone want to make a motion on the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
I second.
So it has been moved and properly seconded that we accept the resolution. I will call the roll. Diana,
Approved.
Vanessa,
Approved.
Marcia,
Approve.
Roosevelt,
Approved.
Paul,
Approve.
Becca,
Approve.
and Carol.
Approved.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously. And that concludes our agenda for today. So it is moved and properly seconded that we adjourn. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for coming on short notice.
Rob,
and
just
participating.
before
Thank
you, Rob,
Thank you for raising this. Bye.
Brian was present. He was here through the communication, so he also was a part of the meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Can
Are
he
you trying here now?
Brian? He may be on mute here, but he was listening in part of it.
He was only here in an emergency in case we didn't have a quorum.
Got it. Okay.
He's at a hearing right now.
Thank
Yes,
you all
I'm-
again very much.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a
Thank
good
you.
weekend. Bye.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye.